Hey, it's Matt Haynes. This gorgeous mic is the V4, second generation from Vanguard Audio Labs. Vanguard is a boutique microphone company out of Los Angeles, and, well, they're a bunch of audio nerds. And I mean this in the best possible way because, well, I'm a bit of an audio nerd myself, which you might have already figured out. And nerd is what you want when you're looking for a unique quality microphone. Nerds bring passion to their work, and Vanguard has certainly done that with their V4. But before I tell you how I know they're such audio nerds, we should take a look at the mic. The V4 is a transformerless, FET-powered, large diaphragm condenser mic with a 34mm capsule, and it's actually a dual capsule design, which gives it the ability to have different polar patterns. You could switch between cardioid, figure 8, and omni modes. You can also engage a -10 or -20 dB pad if you're recording louder sources. Now, if you're primarily using this for content creation or voiceover work, you're probably not going to need a pad, but it's there if you do. The head basket, that's the grill on top, is an open weave design, as Vanguard puts it. What this means is that the density of the grill is less than other mics, so you can see through it a bit more. Theoretically, this might allow high frequencies to pass through more transparently. It also might make the mic more prone to plosives, but you should be using a pop filter anyway if you're using it for vocals. You can definitely see the capsule more clearly than on other mics, but there's no way for me to test if it changes the sound or not. Now, the V4 doesn't come with a pop filter, but just by placing the mic at the corner of my mouth, I can get rid of most of the plosives. Now, for everyday use, I would definitely have a pop filter on here. In fact, I'll put one on in a moment. But before I do, shall we do a plosive test? So I'm going to start by doing a plosive test at the camera and with the mic off to the side. I probably should put some headphones on. Oh yeah, there we go. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. All right, wasn't expecting a whole lot. Now, here we go, directly on the mic. Peter Piper picked a oh. I don't even want to continue. Yeah, it is very susceptible to plosives. The packaging the mic arrives in is pretty impressive. You get a very understated, sophisticated black box that is much larger than you think it should be until you open it up. Inside you get an aluminum padded case. Now, this isn't a high-end Rode case or anything like that, but it will certainly help protect the mic. Inside that, you've got a lot of foam, which is there to protect the shock mount and the mic. And the mic itself comes in a pine box with Vanguard's logo lasered onto the top. You also get a cloth sleeve for covering it when it's spending a lot of time on a mic stand out in the open. And it's also helpful for wiping it down. And you do have to wipe down this mic a lot. I mean, it's got a beautiful glossy finish, but the fingerprints, I'm constantly wiping it down. Although, I might be a little obsessive over it. I'll run through the polar patterns and compare this to a couple of other mics in a minute, but I just want to reiterate something. The care and thought that Vanguard puts into their mics is really obvious as soon as you take it out of the box. They just love what they do, and you can tell. In fact, I could tell this when I met the Vanguard people for the first time. It was a few months ago. I was at a music trade show doing the rounds and, chatting with different companies. I came across the Vanguard booth and struck up a conversation with the CEO. But we had been talking for maybe 30 seconds when we got interrupted. This other guy had walked up to the booth who was apparently a bigwig in the microphone transformer industry. Did you know that was a thing? So the CEO of Vanguard and this guy proceeded to talk about mic transformers for like a good 15 minutes. They even took apart one of the mics and talked about signal paths and other electronic stuff. And of course, the whole time I'm like nodding my head and pretending to know what they're talking about. What struck me though was the enthusiasm that the people of Vanguard showed. And yes, their technical knowledge is obvious, but the sheer excitement over something as mundane as a transformer. Heck, by the end of the conversation, I was excited about transformers. But back to the V4. Let's check out those other polar patterns. So here's the figure 8 mode. So I'm talking directly on axis here. And then if I come around the side here, you can tell how it drops off. And if I come around the back there, so that's figure 8 mode, and of course it's the same on the other side. And omni mode should have about the same loudness and frequency response all the way around the mic, and yep, sure does. And we're back to cardioid mode. I do happen to have some other large diaphragm mics sitting around, so shall we listen to those too? Now you're listening to the Lauten Audio LA-220, and like the Vanguard V4, this is a transformerless FET design. Also, the shock mounts are compatible, which I think is interesting. They have the same thread at the bottom. So I'm using the Lauten Lauten audio microphone in the Vanguard shock mount. Now the LA-220, it's cheaper than the Vanguard, and one of the reasons is that it only has a single capsule, so you can't access different polar patterns. The capsule is slightly smaller than the V4, even though it's still classed as a large diaphragm condenser. Now while both microphones have very low self-noise, the LA-220 is slightly noisier than the V4. It's at 14 dBA instead of 12 dBA. Now on the boom arm, I have the Electronics SE2200. It's also a large diaphragm condenser, and like the LA-220, the diaphragm is also slightly smaller than the V4. It also has a single element and is a cardioid-only mic as well. Now, interestingly, the SE2200 is much quieter than the other two mics with a self-noise of only 8 dBA. Now, with the SE2200, I am using the supplied shock mount that SE Electronics gives with it because there isn't a threaded base to this. It's more of a pressure fit screw thing. By the way, I found this really cool website called Audio Test Kitchen where they've tested like 300 mics under the exact same conditions. You can compare how different mics sound on the same sources, and they've also done very accurate frequency response charts for all the mics. Now, normally you can't compare one manufacturer's chart to another because they measure in different ways, and they use different standards, and they use different smoothing effects and things like that. So it's not apples to apples, it's apples to bananas. At the Audio Test Kitchen, you can compare apples to apples, and they graciously gave me permission to show screenshots of the charts for these mics. So I'll put a link to their site in the video notes. As you can see, all three of these mics have a rise in the high end, and I found it interesting to see how relatively stable the rise is on the V4 and the LA-220. The SE2200 seems to have a big chunk taken out of it, around 7K or so, and I'm hearing this as a slightly dulled high end on the SE2200 as compared to the V4. Now, it's very possible that you didn't spend the 90s performing music at raves, so maybe your upper frequencies haven't been trashed. If so, you might hear something different than what I'm hearing. Let me know in the comments if you do. The LA-220 to my ears is a bit more mid-range forward. Not in a bad way, just a little more presence. This is probably a result of a slight roll-off of the low end as compared to the other mics. The frequency chart you see here is for the earlier version of the Lauten mic, so I don't know how similar the sound is to the Rev 2. The chart does seem to match what I'm hearing though. For me, especially when it comes to up-close voice recording, the V4 is the winner here. It has a nice controlled low end that still sounds full. The SE2200 has a decent low end, but it seems to catch a little muddiness in the low mid sometimes, while the LA-220 seems a little more neutral in the low end. And the V4 has a nice sparkle in the top end without sounding overly hyped like a cheaper mic would. The SE2200 doesn't quite match the V4's top end in my opinion, but the LA-220 sure does. If I could just have one of these mics, it would be the Vanguard V4. However, that's without considering price. The V4 is significantly more expensive than the other two mics. While the SE2200 can be had for around $250 and the LA-220 for $300 or so, the V4 is going to cost you closer to $600. So the V4 isn't for everyone, I get that, and it's probably not in the budget for a lot of semi-pros out there. If, however, you're already making money from your passion and you want a mic made by passionate people, get a V4. Now, if you're still shopping for a large diaphragm condenser mic and like the idea of small boutique companies, you might also want to check out the review I did recently of the STC1. It's from a British company called Sontronics, and you can see that video right here.